Folsom State Prison, California. This is more than a prison. It is a place where the rules were often enforced through fear. One wrong move could end a man's future. For nearly a century, 7 names have been etched into the walls of Folsom. Each left a mark in a different way. Some turned biker discipline into a weapon. Others used ideology like fire. A few commanded entire streets with just a whisper from behind bars. Their backgrounds were different, but they shared one thing. At one point, each of them shook the system to its core. Before we begin, drop a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see how far these stories have traveled. 1. Sonny Barger, Hell's Angels. Sonny Barger was not born a legend, but fate pushed him down that path. He was born in 1938 in Modesto, California. His childhood was marked by loss. His mother left before his first birthday. His father struggled with alcohol. He was raised by his strict Pentecostal grandmother. A boy without affection, but full of grit. At 16, Sonny did the unthinkable. He lied about his age and joined the army. In the military, he found what he had been searching for: discipline, weapons, and brotherhood. But the joy was short-lived. When his lie was uncovered, he was forced out and sent back to the streets. In Oakland, he bought a used Harley. From that moment on, the wheels carried him into a completely different world. In 1957, Sonny and a small group of friends founded the Oakland chapter of Hell's Angels. The skull and helmet logo that would later become famous? At first, it was nothing more than a design ordered from a local trophy shop. But under Sonny's leadership, the club transformed into the most feared symbol of the most feared symbol of the 1% biker world. He wrote down his rules: no injecting during meetings, no stealing from brothers, and above all, never betray the club. Behind these strict codes, prosecutors later said the Angels profited from illegal narcotics and related enterprises. But money was not the only source of fear. It was the way Sonny handled betrayal. According to testimony, a man who tried to steal his Harley was reportedly subjected to internal sanctions that left lasting consequences. Another member accused of pocketing coin collections reportedly died under coercive circumstances. In Oakland, insiders called it biker justice. Sonny also understood that power was not only about weapons, it was about media. He used newspapers and television as tools. When journalist Hunter S. Thompson approached to write a book, Sonny allowed brief access. Later, he dismissed Thompson as a coward. But the book Hell's Angels turned Sonny into a symbol of American counterculture. He advised biker films in Hollywood. He even claimed that once during a Rolling Stones concert, he used intimidation to compel the band to keep playing. By 1973, the tide began to turn. Sonny was arrested on heroin and weapons charges and sent to Folsom. But prison did not end his influence. He allied with the Mexican Mafia, continued directing Angels' affairs, and even married a beauty queen behind bars. Decisions made in his cell still reached the streets, as if the walls of Folsom did not exist. Released in 1977, Sonny faced a sweeping RICO indictment with 32 other members but walked free. In 1982, cancer of the larynx took his voice. He spoke with a mechanical device, yet every word still commanded respect. He once said with dark humor, "I am not a bad guy, but if anyone wants to try me, I am ready." In 1988, betrayal came from within. A trusted member wore a wire, leading to charges of conspiracy involving explosives. During his trial, hundreds of bikers in leather jackets filled the courthouse pause, and jurors reported threats against their families. Despite the pressure, Sonny received another 3.5 years. From prison, he sent a postcard to the prosecutor that read, "The weather is beautiful. Wish you were here." After his release, his enemies still hunted him. The rival outlaws gang allegedly placed a $100,000 bounty on his head. The FBI stopped a group of would-be assassins. Yet Sonny survived. In his later years, he settled in Arizona. He wrote books, appeared in films, and even advised the series Sons of Anarchy. In his memoir, he wrote, "Keep your head up high, stay loyal, remain free, and always value honor." Sonny Barger passed away in 2022 at the age of 83. He left behind a legacy of turning a biker club into an empire and himself into a figure both feared and revered. Some called him Maximum Leader, the supreme head of Hell's Angels. 2. George Jackson, Black Guerrilla Family. On August 21, 1971, gunfire erupted in the yard of San Quentin. An inmate rushed out wearing a wig, pulling a 9mm pistol hidden inside. He shouted, "Gentlemen, the dragon has come!" That man was George Jackson, a name that made the California prison system tremble. But to understand how someone convicted for just $71 became the most dangerous symbol behind bars, we need to go back 10 years. George Jackson was born in 1941 in Chicago. His youth was troubled. At 18, he committed an armed robbery at a gas station in Los Angeles. His take was only $71, but his sentence was 1 year to life. In reality, it meant a prison term with no end in sight. Jackson later wrote, "I met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao when I entered prison, and they saved me." In solitary confinement, he absorbed revolutionary ideas and turned them into a weapon of the mind. In 1966, Jackson befriended W.L. Nolan. Together, they planted the seeds of what later became known as the Black Guerrilla Family, part prison gang, part revolutionary movement. Some say Jackson only started a small crew, and the Black Guerrilla Family rose after his death. Some claim he only created the Black Family, and that the BGF took shape after his death, but few deny he was the spirit who carried black radical thought into the cells. On January 13, 1970, the exercise yard at Soledad turned deadly. Guard O.P.G. Miller opened fire, resulting in the deaths of W.L. Nolan and 2 other black inmates. A jury ruled the shooting justified. Another guard, John Mills, was later found deceased after a severe incident inside the facility. George Jackson, Fleta Drumgo, and John Clutchette were charged. They became known as the Soledad Brothers. Protests erupted outside, and the slogan, "Free the Soledad Brothers," filled the streets. Angela Davis, a scholar and communist activist, joined the defense committee. Jackson and Davis even referred to each other as husband and wife, a relationship that fueled a media storm. Tragedy only deepened. On August 7, 1970, Jackson's younger brother Jonathan, just 17 years old, stormed into a courthouse in Marin County. Armed with guns, he freed 3 inmates and took Judge Harold Haley hostage, demanding George's release. When the group attempted to escape, gunfire broke out. Jonathan was killed instantly. Judge Haley also lost his life. The specific circumstances are omitted here. Angela Davis faced prosecution because the weapons were registered in her name. After nearly 2 years, she was acquitted. But the incident turned George Jackson into a figure both celebrated and demonized. 1 year later, the end came. On August 21, 1971, attorney Stephen Bingham met with Jackson. Shortly afterward, Jackson appeared with a wig and pulled out an Astra 9mm pistol. He declared, "Gentlemen, the dragon has come." A violent clash erupted. 3 guards and 2 inmates lost their lives. Jackson ran toward the fence but was shot and killed in the yard. Officials called it an escape attempt. Writer James Baldwin countered, "No black person believes George Jackson died the way they said he did." Attorney Bingham fled the country for 13 years before returning to the U.S., where a jury acquitted him. To this day, no one truly knows who brought the gun inside. Jackson's death sent shockwaves. The very next day, 700 inmates at Attica went on hunger strike in his honor. Weeks later, the bloody uprising at Attica erupted, with many seeing Jackson's death as the spark. His books, Soledad Brother and Blood in My Eye, became handbooks of prison resistance. Even now, in California, if an inmate is found with Soledad Brother, prison officials may classify them as gang-affiliated. Half a century later, George Jackson's name still evokes fear inside the system. Jackson once wrote, "Prison is the closest thing to death a man can experience while still alive." And yet, in that state, he ignited a movement. Some saw him as a dangerous killer, others as a revolutionary soldier. The truth lies somewhere between. But one thing is certain. From a $71 robbery, George Jackson became an unshakable symbol in American prison history. 3. Joe "Pegleg" Morgan. Mexican Mafia. Joe Morgan was not born in Mexico. He was the son of Croatian immigrants raised in San Pedro, then hardened in the streets of East Los Angeles. There, he learned Spanish like a native, mastered barrio slang, and blended in so completely that young Chicanos said, "To us, Joe was Mexican. If you called him a white boy, you just signed your death warrant." As a teenager, Joe made headlines. He was involved in the death of a man married to his older lover. He was convicted and sent to San Quentin. In prison, he once impersonated another inmate in a bold escape attempt but was quickly caught. The lesson was clear. True power lay not in muscle, but in intelligence and toughness. In 1961, after an accident cost him his leg, Joe received a prosthetic. He turned it into a strange weapon, hiding a hacksaw blade in its wooden joint. He then led an 11-man escape from Los Angeles County Jail, crawling through utility tunnels. Days later, police found him at a grocery store. It was almost dark comedy, proof that no matter what he tried, prison had its claws in him for life. By the 1960s, Morgan climbed to the top of La M, the Mexican Mafia. He had no Mexican blood, but he had discipline, intellect, and ruthlessness. He imposed a tax on street gangs, secured drug pipelines from Mexico, and even built an alliance with the Aryan Brotherhood, a powerful white supremacist group. To DEA agents, Joe Morgan looked like an old-school mob boss. He spoke little, kept his word, and every decision he made carried the weight of a death sentence. He was not just a distant figure. When someone on the outside refused to pay their share, that person disappeared. A case in Seal Beach became evidence against him when former associate Ramon "Mundo" Mendoza testified that Morgan gave the order. Based on that testimony, Joe was sentenced to life. But even prison walls could not contain his influence. Inside, he called young followers "mi hijo," my son, then gave his orders. In the early 1990s, Los Angeles was drowning in drive-by shootings. Public outrage grew. Then a command came down: no more drive-bys. Anyone who disobeyed would face consequences. According to multiple sources, it was Joe Morgan who issued that order, and the remarkable happened. The number of shootings dropped, a cold paradox, using fear to impose a kind of peace. Morgan's world was not only violence. He read the poetry of Octavio Paz, he told Aztec myths. He explained the Mexica sun symbol to his men. A man who could order deaths, then speak passionately about culture, became both feared and admired. In 1992, Hollywood touched a nerve. The film American Me was loosely based on La M and portrayed a character resembling Morgan. He was furious. He sued for $500,000, claiming the filmmakers used his likeness without permission. After the film's release, several people connected to the project were murdered. The line between movie and reality vanished. With La M, disrespecting a legend meant paying in blood. Joe Morgan did not die by knife or bullet. After 4 decades of violence, he succumbed to liver cancer at Corcoran Prison in 1993. A quiet end that felt almost unfair, yet it sealed his name as an immortal legend among inmates. Joe "Pegleg" Morgan proved that power in prison was not about race or heritage. It was about making others believe that your word was law. He was the only outsider who rose to the top of La M, and he held that throne until his final breath. 4. Robert "Babo" Sosa, Nuestra Familia, Santa Barbara, California. Some call it Santa Bruta, a paradise of blue waters, but also the birthplace of one of Nuestra Familia's most feared leaders. Inside Folsom's secret files, one name stands out in bold ink: Robert "Babo" Sosa, the first elected general. The man who gave Nuestra Familia its military discipline and turned it into a crime machine built like an army. Nuestra Familia first formed in the late 1960s. At the start, it was just a loose crew of northern inmates banding together to protect themselves from the southern-based Mexican Mafia. But under Babo, the NF transformed. He became the first officially elected general, and he did something unheard of. He wrote a constitution, inside prison. That constitution laid out goals, structure, and discipline. What was once a ragtag crew became a paramilitary crime syndicate. Their oath spread from cell to cell. If I lead, follow. If I hesitate, push me. If I fall, avenge me. If I betray, kill me. For NF members, this wasn't just a slogan, it was a way of life, and once you joined, you never went back. Sosa's biggest creation was the 14 bonds, 14 iron rules that every norteño and Nuestra Raza recruit had to obey. No betrayal, no gambling debts, absolute obedience. Break a bond, face the harshest penalties. Court records later described it this way. The 14 bonds are a complete textbook of duties and consequences. In other words, Babo built a deadly academy right behind the walls. He also locked in their chain of command. At the top, the generals, La Mesa. Beneath them, captains, señores, lieutenants, knights, and soldiers. On the streets, the norteños became their foot soldiers. Inside, the Nuestra Raza acted like a training school, passing down the rules to every new generation. Many sources say the 14 bonds were first drafted in Folsom's Unit 4A, the cold, solitary wing. Whether true or not, the impact was real. Any norteño who ignored duty on the streets would soon face a severe internal order sent from inside. But power always comes with blood. In the early 1980s, internal conflict shook the NF. Prison intelligence reports claim Sosa was even impeached after clashes with other generals. If true, it only proved how far the NF had evolved, powerful enough to run its own government inside the walls. In 2008, the FBI launched Operation Gator Roll, taking down norteño cliques across California. Reporters once again invoked Sosa's name. He was called the Ghost who started it all because the structure he built allowed Nuestra Familia to survive for decades, from Santa Barbara to San Jose and beyond. His legacy still lingers. In the 2020s, when federal courts sentenced leaders like David D.C. Cervantes, prosecutors said clearly, the group existed only because of the discipline, the Constitution, and the 14 bonds. All of it carried Sosa's fingerprints. To outsiders, Robert Sosa was just another inmate. But to the norteños, he was the general who turned chaos into discipline, who shaped a northern prison crew into an underground army. One former member said, "He turned prison into an academy. And we were the students who had no choice but to graduate." Babo Sosa proved one thing. Ideas can be stronger than knives or guns. A few pages of rules turned Nuestra Familia into the only crew tough enough to stand toe-to-toe with La M. Even today, most norteños on the streets may not know his face, but they still live and die by the 14 bonds. 5. Barry the Baron Mills. Aryan Brotherhood. Atlanta Federal Prison, 1979. Inside a cramped bathroom, a card game embedded in violence. John Sherman Marsloff, a 36-year-old inmate, was attacked and left seriously injured. The man with the knife was Barry Byron Mills, a 31-year-old blonde convict. From that moment, Barry Mills was no longer a nameless prisoner. He became the Baron, future boss of the Aryan Brotherhood. Born in 1948 in California, Mills grew up in violence. By 20, he was serving time for armed robbery. Inside, he absorbed the Brotherhood's one rule: blood in, blood out. Survival meant proving yourself in blood. And with the Atlanta attack, Mills showed he could go further than anyone else. In the 1980s, he joined forces with Tyler the Hulk Bingham. Together, they rebuilt the ABU. It was no longer just a racist gang. It became a power structure. In 1989, at FCI Lompoc, an inmate named Arva Lee Ray was forced into a fatal overdose, then strangled. Court files later described it as a blood-in ritual carried out under Mills' approval. Every killing was a reminder, loyalty or elimination. By the early 90s, the AB reorganized. A 3-man commission replaced the old council. Mills and Bingham sat at the top, giving orders from solitary cells. Their communication was primitive but deadly. Pipes in the wall, coded letters, even childish phrases that carried life or death meaning. "It's a baby boy" meant green light. "It's a baby girl" meant stand down. It sounded like a joke, but each message decided who lived and who didn't. 1997 marked their peak. At USP Lewisburg, 2 black inmates were killed in a prison attack. Prosecutors said the order came directly from Mills, who was locked in Supermax at the time. At trial, they revealed a slip of paper. It read, "War with DC Blacks, TD," written in urine. The words only appeared when held over fire. The courtroom fell silent. From a solitary cell in Colorado, Mills had sparked a war nearly 2,000 miles away. In 2002, the U.S. government struck back. A massive RICO indictment named 40 AB members, linking them to 32 murders and murder plots spanning 3 decades. Mills was at the center. The 2006 trial in Santa Ana was a spectacle. Agents reenacted how orders were flushed through pipes, how Mills coded messages with the number 187. The defense even claimed in a dramatic twist that mob boss John Gotti once reached out to the AB for revenge. That claim was never proven, but it shook the courtroom. When the jury debated the death penalty, they deadlocked. The result? Mills and Bingham received 4 life sentences without parole. Yet, even inside the concrete tomb of ADX Florence, his name still carried weight. The Baron ruled through codes, networks, and fear. On July 8, 2018, Barry Mills was found dead in his cell at ADX Florence. It was just 1 day after his 70th birthday. Officials gave no cause of death, only saying there was no foul play. A quiet ending, the opposite of the brutality that defined his life. But his legacy did not fade. The Aryan Brotherhood remains one of the deadliest prison gangs in America, still fueled by the laws of blood that Mills helped shape. One former inmate said, "He could sit in a cell for years, but one slip of paper was enough to make hundreds tremble." 6. Luis Huero Flores, Mexican Mafia, 1957. Dewell Vocational Institution, a youth prison in Tracy, California. On a dusty yard, teenage inmates from rival barrios gathered. White fence, the avenues. Clanton 14, Primera Flats. On the streets, they were enemies. But here, a light-haired kid with the nickname Huero Buff made a pitch. "Out there, we shoot at each other. In here, if we don't stand together, we'll die one by one." His name was Luis Flores, and on that yard Flores planted the seed of La M, the Mexican Mafia. At the time, Mexican inmates were scattered, often targeted by organized white and black crews. Flores saw it clearly. To survive, they needed unity. His idea was simple but powerful. Take enemies and turn them into allies. Create a gang of gangs that could defend itself and control the prison economy. They chose the symbol M, La M, the 13th letter of the alphabet. Another symbol was La Mano Negra, the black hand, borrowed from the Italian Mafia. But make no mistake, this was an American creation. From day one, Flores set the rule. Blood in, blood out. You joined in blood, and you only left in death. That oath kept everyone loyal. La M quickly controlled every hustle inside DVY. Cigarettes, extra food, contraband substances smuggled in by corrupt staff. Flores and his crew introduced tax. Anyone who wanted to do business on the yard paid a cut. The system made the group more than just survivors. It made them a shadow empire. One inmate later recalled, "The second you saw an EME member on the yard, everything went quiet. No knife needed, just a look in his eyes." From DVY, the model spread through California's prisons. By the early 1960s, La M reached Folsom and San Quentin. Flores' system turned inmates into soldiers and violence into management. Anyone who defied an order often faced swift retaliation. But Flores' biggest move was connecting prison to the streets. Outside, tens of thousands of Sureños belonged to dozens of barrios. Inside, they all had to pay tribute to La M. The tax bought them protection in prison and backing on the streets. The two-way network turned La M into more than a gang. It became a government in the shadows for Southern California's Hispanic community. Flores' innovation was to make La M a shared brand, not just another barrio clique. Every Sureño, from San Diego to Los Angeles, bowed to the M. No constitution, just blood law. No national flag, just one letter. But power brings war. In Northern California, Nuestra Familia rose as a rival. From Soledad to Folsom, the clash between NF and La MA turned yards into battlegrounds. And every investigator traced it back to DVY, 1957, and one name: Luis Huero Buff Flores. Little is known about Flores' later life, but his legacy is written in every report. Today, La MA ranks among the most dangerous prison gangs in America. Every Sureño on the street still pays tribute, just as Flores designed. One investigator summed it up: the Mexican Mafia wasn't born in Mexico. It was born in California on a dusty yard. And Huero Buff planted the flag. Flores turned enemies into brothers. He turned scattered barrios into an empire. 7. David D.C. Cervantes, Nuestra Familia, Pelican Bay, California. Inside a windowless cell, under a buzzing fluorescent light, an old man writes on a slip of paper. By the time that paper reaches the yard, it could mark someone for serious retaliation. His name is David D.C. Cervantes, General of Nuestra Familia. Nuestra Familia, La MA's sworn rival, existed to protect norteños, the Northern California gangs. But under Cervantes, it evolved into something else, not just protection, a shadow government. If La MA was the gang of gangs, then NF under DC became the Supreme Court of the North. Cervantes started small, as a regimental commander in Kings County, coordinating street regiments. But the turning point came in 2008, when several NF leaders were shipped to ADX Florence. Power at Pelican Bay was left open. Reports said 2 veteran generals, Jose Huerito Gonzalez and James Conejo Perez, were sidelined, and one man emerged as the undisputed leader, David Cervantes. In a silent coup, he became the lone general of NF in California. He wasn't the kind to swing a knife. His power came from the General Advocate's Office, the group that handled discipline. Every complaint, every accusation passed through him. He assigned investigators, reviewed reports, and signed the final orders. A warning might mean nothing more than words, but a signature marked green light could mean death on the yard. One signature, one life. From Pelican Bay, Cervantes and a 7-man general council controlled both prison and streets. Orders moved through coded letters, plumbing pipes, and contraband cell phones. In 2010, local news reported that from the SHU, where inmates weren't supposed to touch the outside world, Cervantes still gave orders using a smuggled phone. The blood trail followed. In 2015, Lorenzo Lencho Guzman lost his life in an attack. That same year, Antonio Sombras Villagrana was targeted. In 2016, John Knockers Musquiz nearly lost his life. By 2019, John Shanks Reyna and Matt Rocha were marked. Court records later traced those hits back to Cervantes and his council. In August 2021, the feds dropped a sweeping RICO indictment. At its core was David D.C. Cervantes. The trial in Oakland stretched 12 weeks in 2024. Prosecutors laid it bare: a structured organization, iron discipline, a 76-year-old general still authorizing violent green light orders. One prosecutor told the jury, "Prison gangs are a blight on the justice system. With contraband phones sold, they run a criminal network that spills onto the streets." On October 2, 2024, the jury returned guilty verdicts for Cervantes and 3 other leaders. In June 2025, the court sentenced him to 120 months in federal prison. The number looked small, but in reality, it was the end. The entire General Council, the 7 men who once ruled from Pelican Bay, had fallen. One former FBI agent put it bluntly, "Dismantling Nuestra Familia took decades, but now the 7 who sat on the council have paid the price." The last image of Cervantes wasn't a blade or a gun. It was an old man in court, listening as the judge read the sentence, yet his legacy echoes. Nuestra Familia, once a band of protectors, became an underground court where a slip of paper could decide who lived and who died. Folsom, San Quentin, Pelican Bay. These are not just prisons. They are mirrors of society's darkest corners. 7 men, 7 stories. From biker clubs to prison revolutions. From La MA to Nuestra Familia. All of them show one truth. When law is broken, The shadows will write laws of their own, but every death, every sentence, every tragedy carries a lesson. Power built on violence never lasts. If these stories made you think, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Let's see how far these tales have traveled. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the secrets hidden behind prison walls. Because to understand the darkness is the only way we truly value the light.